Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Angry J here, back yet again with another NHL team breakdown for the Just Take a Genesis version of NHL 94. Still in the Norris division here, now going to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is kind of an interesting time in history that some people may have forgotten. Toronto was actually in the Western Conference, or the Campbell Conference as they called it back then. It was the Western teams, and Detroit and Toronto were both in the conference with all the other Western Conference teams that there are now today, like Chicago and San Jose, Vancouver, Dallas, on and on and on. So it wasn't until the late 90s, or yeah, it was late 90s, right? When Toronto moved over. I forget when it happened exactly, but it wasn't until at least the mid 90s when Toronto moved over to the Eastern Conference, where we're familiar with them today. They've been there for probably over 20 years now. So it can be easy to forget where Toronto was initially. During this time, the Toronto Maple Leafs were a pretty good team. They were more of a fantastic playoff team, but they still had a nice regular season in 1992-93. They went 44, 29, and 11. This was good for 99 points and a third place finish in the Norris division. They had a first round date with the Detroit Red Wings and beat them. And then they moved on to face the St. Louis Blues after they upset the Chicago Blackhawks, and they beat them as well. Toronto fell victim to the LA Kings in the Campbell Conference Finals in 7 games, as some people may know. That was the series where just a real showdown between Doug Gilmour and Wayne Gretzky. Toronto would then go on to the conference finals the next year as well, 93-94, but then they would lose out to Vancouver yet again. So this would, obviously play a role in them continuing to have a Stanley Cup drought that spans now, I believe, 51 years. They won the last original 6 Stanley Cup, which was in 1967, if I'm not wrong. There's a chance I am, but Toronto, safe to say, they have not won a Stanley Cup final in a long time. But this 2-year stretch, they were a very competent regular season team, and then they had these deep playoff runs that ultimately just did not work out for them, unfortunately. Surprisingly, I think in this game, Toronto only has an average home ice advantage at Maple Leaf Gardens. You always think Maple Leaf Gardens is a scary place to play, and they have a high one, but they only have an average one, so they're going to have some decent bonuses at home, but nothing crazy probably. And on the road, they're an average road ice disadvantage, so you're going to have to deal with some penalties to some of your players. Toronto is a Tier 3 team, but they're not as exciting as their other Tier 3 teams. They're more of a steady Eddie type of team, but they're perfectly capable against Quebec, Dallas, and New York. Rangers, that is, not the Islanders, the Rangers. They can skate with Quebec. They're a little less skilled, but I think more defensively minded. And when it comes to Dallas and New York Rangers, they're not as fast as them. The Maple Leafs aren't, but they're more consistent. I think they're just easier to get a good game out of than those other 2 teams. So that's why I think they're fit comfortably as a Tier 3 team, although they might be a little underwhelming there. But they're just kind of a nice team to have. No one gets excited about using Toronto, really, unless you love the Maple Leafs by chance. Some strengths for Toronto: they have a strong defensive team, especially at home. Potvin can get some really nice boosts at home, and he can be a pretty good goalie there. He can maybe steal you a win or 2. I've seen some games where he just shuts the door down on guys like Dino Ciccarelli when he's at home and he has a hot streak. So overall, as a team, Toronto, they can definitely do some work at home, especially on the defensive side of the ice. Gilmour is a bona fide 2-way star in this game, and he is what makes Toronto a Tier 3 team in terms of their forwards. The other 2 forwards on this team are just nice. They're probably more Tier 4, Tier 5 type quality. But with such an amazing player like Doug Gilmour, it helps elevate their game and makes them play to the Tier 3 level. So Gilmour is definitely a guy you want to be using as much as possible. This is also a fairly consistent team, so you're not going to wonder, oh, am I going to have some weirdo cold streaks, or some of my guys just going to have bad games today, because their ratings, they can fluctuate pretty high, pretty wildly, I should say. But Toronto, no, they're pretty steady, so you're going to get some good games out of them on a consistent basis. They are also pretty solid at moving the puck. They have a lot of very good passers. None of them are elite, but throughout the lineup, it's nice to have just, every guy can move the puck effectively, so they definitely do have that going for them. And Toronto, lastly, they have a few CB checkers and a few weight buck checkers, so they have this nice balance that they can utilize to fit any style of gameplay. And if you're a very versatile player, then having a team like Toronto's can be very nice for you. Some weaknesses, especially within this tier, they are under skilled when it comes to skating. They have Gilmour, who can skate pretty well, but then other than that, they only have good skaters at best. They have some issues keeping up with Dallas and New York if you let them play some pretty wide open hockey. There also isn't a pure goal scoring option in Toronto. There isn't a guy with just a unquestionable consistent shot. We'll look into the player ratings here, but you definitely don't have a pure sniper. With Toronto, you have to know your matchup. You know, you may have the strength of having a bunch of CB checking guys and weight bug checking guys to use, but that means you need to know which matchups you can take advantage of and when these guys can play physical against your opponent's players. Toronto does not play well from behind. They're not an especially dynamic offensive team. They're better at getting the early lead and then just kind of, cruising the rest of the way, playing good defensive hockey as opposed to just like searching for goals frantically. And also, lastly, their second defenseman and their third forward spot can be a bit of a black hole if you like to rely on highly skilled players. If you're not very comfortable with, the average players or players with a very specific skill set, those positions can be tough to fill out with this team. So you're going to be relying on your star players all the much more in that case. So let's go ahead and look at some line combinations now. First thing you want to do is take Andrew Check out, unfortunately. I know he's a Hall of Famer. He's an all-time power play goal scoring leader. But in 94, it just wasn't very kind to him, unfortunately. You want to put Borshevsky on the left. You'll leave Gilmour in the center. And then right wing, you'll have a lot of people you can put here. This is where your real question mark is. I tend to go Wendell Clark or John Cullen, so we'll talk about those guys. But first, let's talk about Nikolai Borshevsky. He had a very short and brief career in the NHL, but his first year, his rookie year, was a pretty strong one, and that's why he gets these good ratings. He has 4 agility, 4 speed, so an average skater, 4 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness. 2 defensive awareness. Yeah, 2. So he's definitely an offensive-minded player. He has 3 shot power, 4 accuracy, so that's okay. Especially in this tier against some of the, you got a lot of average goalies in this tier, so his shot's going to be fine. He has 4 passing, 4 stick handling, so he's perfectly fine as a wing, distributing the puck. 188 pounds. He's a decent weight bug checker. He's going to be not a dominant one, though, especially without the skating or, being a lighter weight. If he was a lighter weight player, he'd have a much easier time being a dominant weight bug checker. But he's merely a decent defensive option, fairly resistant to weight bug checks of his own. But if your opponent knows how to CB check, going against a team like the Rangers can be a bit of a chore for him if your opponent can CB check, because the Rangers have a lot of heavyweight players that can really skate, and Borshevsky can unfortunately become a bit of a target. But he's your best winger. He's your number 2 guy on offense, and probably your number 2 guy on defense as well. But your number 1 guy on both sides of the ice is my favorite player, Doug Gilmour. This was really in his heyday. He was a very effective player. He was having career years here during this time, and he got some pretty good ratings, but I still think he got shafted just a little bit. He has 5 agility, 4 speed, so he's a very technical skater, very nimble. High agility means he can start faster, stop faster, and turn better. And he's a very low weight player, so he's going to be a very nice skater, very elusive, but he's not blazingly fast. So unfortunately, the breakaway opportunities might be a little bit limited with him. He's got 5 offensive awareness, 5 defensive awareness, so he's very smart. He's usually in a pretty good spot on the ice. He has 4 shot power, 4 accuracy, so he's your best shooter, but I don't think he's really a sniper. He has only 4 pass accuracy and 4 stick handling, which is really confusing to me because he was one of the best passers of the puck during this time. He really had a bunch of assists, like 70, 80 assists in a season. I think he had 91 season during this time, so 4 passing seems a little low, but what do I know? He's 122 pounds, so he's a wonderful weight bug check option. He's got the skating to do it. He's got the low weight to do it. He's almost as good as Jeremy Roenick at it, but not quite, because Roenick is a little bit better skater. But still, Gilmour, just absolutely wonderful in that regard. And if your opponent does not know how to CB check, Gilmour is one of those guys that you can really slice through defenses with. But with only 4 stick handling, he won't be as effective as, say, again, Jeremy Roenick, because Jeremy Roenick has 5 stick handling, and 5 stick handling does make a difference over just the 4 rating. So Gilmour does have 4 checking, so in AI mode, he's going to be a pretty effective checker. But it doesn't really help his CB checking. I mean, he might be able to CB check Joe Juno or Neil Broughton or guys like that, guys around his weight class. But You're going to want to use him as a great weight bug checker. But one thing to just keep in mind with Doug Gilmour is, for whatever reason in this game, he takes a lot of penalties. I don't know if there's anything to it, there's a reason why, or if it's just one of those things because you're using Doug Gilmour a lot and you're just trying to, crush people with body checks. But he does take a lot of penalties, so try not to go into overkill mode with him. This will help him stay on the ice a little bit more often and allow you to have your best player on the team on the ice. Because when Doug Gilmour comes off the ice, this is where Toronto has some issues. They become a very average team very quickly, and that's where games can go south, unfortunately. So use your Gilmour with a little bit more caution than you might want to initially, and I think you'll get a lot more out of him. But then now we come to the third forward spot where we have plenty of options, but none of them may really tickle your fancy, unfortunately. Wendell Clark will be my first try at filling this forward spot. He has 3 agility, 3 speed, so that's his main weakness right there. Is he's just kind of an average skater, and against faster teams like Dallas and New York, that can be a problem that is exacerbated, really. 3 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness, so he might not always be in the spot that you hope he is, to take advantage of his 5-shot power. This is his strength, is his shot power. He's the only guy on this team, well, the only forward on this team, I should say, with 5-shot power. This is what makes him a unique option. This is what makes him, someone you consider to put in your roster, because, otherwise you probably wouldn't. He only has 3 shot accuracy though, so he can be a little wild. He can be breaking glass and putting this puck in the stands more often than on the net, unfortunately. He's got 4 passing, 4 stick handling, so he's competent there on the wing. Nothing incredible, but 204 pounds, 3-3 skating. He's not elusive. You're not going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities with him. He's mostly John Daly. He's just grip it and rip it, and you hope it ends up in the back of the net. For checking, he's going to be decent AI checker. He's a decent CB checker, but again, the lack of skating is really the culprit to why you wouldn't want to put him in the roster over some other guys maybe. Some other guys you might consider, John Cullen, 4 agility, 3 speed, so he has a small upgrade in agility over Wendell Clark, but again, 3 speed, that's kind of a non-starter for some people when it comes to their forwards at this tier. 4 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness, 3 shot power, so very underwhelming there, but he does have the 4 accuracy, so it's just like Borshevsky. 4 passing, 4 stick handling, so again, very similar to Borshevsky, just a little bit less of a skater. 196 pounds means he's a middleweight. He's not going to be a great defensive player. He does not really CV check very well. He can weight bug check heavier guys like, James Patrick, Mark Messier, to name a few. But he's not a great defensive option either. He's just a nice puck handling winger who can, get your one-timer game going. He can cut in on net. I personally like deking with him because I like right-handed options to deke with, especially if their agility is higher than their speed. But with 3 speed, it can be difficult to get to the net with John Cullen. So that's, one thing that may steer you away from him. If you want a better skater, you'll want to go with Glenn Anderson, but he has his own warts. He has 4 agility, 4 speed. This is kind of the downside of Glenn's career. He was a prolific scorer, Hall of Fame type scorer in the 80s with the Oilers, but at this point, he's just merely a decent player, unfortunately. He has 4 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness, 3 shot power, 3 shot accuracy. So these ratings, I think, are really unkind to him, but that's what we have to deal with in this game, unfortunately. He is one of the weaker shooters on this roster. 4 passing, 4 stick handling, so that's okay on the wing. Another middleweight option, 196 pounds, not a good CB checker, not a great defensive player. He's perfectly okay in a lot of things. He just skates a little bit better than some other guys on this roster, but he's also underwhelming. If you want to look at something else with a little bit more skill, there is Dave Andrechuk. You can go back to him, but 3 agility, 3 speed, and 228 pounds means he's going to be a very slow accelerator. It's going to take time for him to turn with the puck. He's a really poor skater, and this limits whatever that he can do for you. 4 offensive awareness, 4 defensive awareness. And this is another player that I think got some really unfair ratings. Dave Andrechuk was a 50-plus goal scorer in this season. He was scoring goals left and right during this part of his career, and he got some very average ratings: 4 shot power, 4 shot accuracy, 3 passing, 3 stick handling. He's just a very average player. He's easily abused by weight bug checkers, and when you weigh 228 pounds, almost everybody that you run up to is a weight bug checker. So He's gonna have a lot of problems staying on his skates. He's a forechecker on his own right, so he's gonna be decent in AI mode when it comes to defense, but his lack of skating is problematic, and that's why I don't think he's really startable. And then you also have Peter Zezel. He's a nice complementary player if you have to reach down deeper into your forward ranks, but he's just a nice passer, and he's another CB checking option. Nothing too exciting there, but a very solid player nonetheless. So I tend to go with Borszewski, Gilmour, Clark, but if you're going against Dallas or New York, you might want to put Glenn Anderson there just to have the extra mobility on hand, and I think that'll be worthwhile in that matchup. So the defense, let's go ahead and take that look at that now. You got Dave Ellett, and he is your number one defenseman by far. 4 agility, 4 speed. He's got 3 offensive awareness and 4 defensive awareness, so pretty standard stuff there. He has the 5 shot power among this unit, so he's very, very powerful shot, but only the 1 accuracy. So you might get a goal or 2 out of him a game, but you might just as well get no goals out of him because he couldn't find the net with his accuracy, unfortunately. He's got 4 passing, 4 stick handling, so he's very competent at moving the puck from his own zone, making those home run passes to try and get those limited breakaway opportunities that the Maple Leafs will have, but he's likely the one to spring those opportunities if they do come around. 212 pounds, 4 checking, very good CB checking option if you're capable of that. If you're not a good CB checker, just use Dave Ellett to poke check with, and then he's mobile enough in most cases to keep up with his opponent and apply poke checks, so he's very effective there. And then if you get the puck with him, like I said, just look for those passes and work the puck up the ice that way, because I wouldn't really recommend just skating the puck with him every time you get it with him, because he's a weight bug checking target at his high weight. Second defensive spot, again, we have a little bit of a debate here. First option, we'll look at Todd Gill. He's the default starter. He's got 3 agility, 3 speed, so he's a pretty average skater. 3 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness. Again, very average. Shot power of 2, shot accuracy of 2, so you're not going to use him a lot on offense. And passing 2, stick handling 2. He's just across the board, underskilled player, but he's your best weight bug checking option. 188 pounds. He's even a 4 checker, so in AI mode, he's going to be a decent checker. And he can CB check the likes of Jeremy Roenick and maybe even Pat LaFontaine in certain situations. But Gill is just your bare bones weight bug checking defenseman, and I don't think he's very exciting at all. There's also Jamie McCown, who's a bit more exciting. 3 agility, 3 speed, 2 offensive awareness, 4 defensive. So I think he'll be pretty good staying his own zone and picking off passes. He's got 4 shot power, 1 accuracy. But the nice things about him here is 4 pass accuracy and the 3 stick handling. Some nice upgrades there from Todd Gill. 204 pounds, another 4 checker. So again, AI mode, it's gonna be a good checker. He's a decent CB checker, although not great. He may have some issues trying to get a CB checking going against Dallas and New York, but you can use a poke check in those matchups, and I think he should be okay. And then he has the better skills in which to get the puck off his stick with. So I think McCown's your best defenseman put in the second spot, but with Ellett already being a larger defenseman, it might be a little bit of overkill to have McCown there as well. Especially if you put him on the right behind Clark, then you kind of have 2 slower, plodding guys, and that can be a real issue against the faster teams in Tier 3. So I might be inclined to switch McCown and Ellett in that situation, or maybe not put in Clark and put in Anderson instead to get a little bit more speed to help out on defense, because you don't want to really compound your problems of lack of speed on one side of the ice specifically. The rest of this defense is kind of not really that great. There's Bob Rouse, who's really your only other competent option. 3 agility, 3 speed, but he's very much like Todd Gill. He's got 2 offensive awareness, 4 defensive awareness, but he's underskilled. 2 shot power, 0 accuracy, 2 passing, 2 stick handling, 220 pounds, 4 checking. He's a CB checking machine, provided he can actually lay his body on the opponent. If he's out there chasing the play, it's not going to be looking good, but he's your only other option really to consider in this blue line corps. So I'm going to use McCown in this matchup because I'm playing against Quebec, so I think his skating will be just fine with Clark in this case. Lastly, let's look at the goalie here. Felix Potvin, the cat, I think he was a rookie this year. They actually traded Grant Fuhr away during the season to give Potvin more starts, and he responded pretty well. He's very good goalie in this game as well. He has 4 agility, 4 puck control, 4 save ratings everywhere, and 188 pounds. He's a perfectly good manual goalie, AI goalie. Like I said, at home he can get some really nice boosts and turn into a really nice goalie that can maybe help steal you a game. He's not at the Fuhr or Belfour level, obviously, but I think he's in that tier right below Grant Fuhr. I think with Potvin, Essensa, they're really in that third tier of goalies when it comes to their effectiveness. So let's go ahead and review here real quick some strategies with Toronto. You want to play at the speed of the Leafs, and what I mean by that is you do not want to be forced to play faster than that. It's tough to counter that sometimes in Tier 3 when you have Dallas and New York banging on your door trying to just turn the juice up. With Toronto, you just want to ease off the gas pedal if you can, make those other teams play a little bit slower, and then those teams, their skills are not always very consistent, like, game to game. They have some weird players with some weird skill ratings. So if you can make them play a little bit slower, limit their chances on net, you're going to have a lot more success with Toronto. You also just have to know your matchup. Toronto's not a team you just walk up to and go, I'm going to do whatever I want in this matchup. I have this overwhelming player, and they're not going to be able to stop me. No, Toronto, a little bit different. You got to know who you have and who you're going up against, and then kind of just slowly whittle your opponent down and frustrate them. And that's another thing. You want to understand your opponent and what they're trying to do with their team. If you think they want to just skate around and skate like that and just do all sorts of crazy things, then try and play a more composed style where they come to you, and then when they get to you, you knock them down and then you counter. So, or if they want to play a slower type of game, with Toronto, that's kind of what you want. So just you can feel comfortable in that situation and be patient and work the puck effectively in that manner. Using all your players and getting everybody incorporated. So you want to definitely know what your opponent's trying to do out there when you're using Toronto. Also, you want to use Gilmour on both sides of the ice. He's your best offensive player and your best defensive player. So if you can man control him, do everything you can to get him in man control. With Toronto, you definitely want to keep the game in front of you. They have a tough time chasing down breakaways and odd man opportunities because they're not a very fast team. So the more you can keep the play in front of your players, and then you can attack your opponent moving forward instead of having to chase them back, you're going to find yourself having a lot more success with Toronto. And then lastly, you want to try and get to a quick start with Toronto, get that quick early 1 or 2 goal burst, and then make your opponent feel the pressure so that they make more mistakes, hopefully, and then that just kind of feeds into Toronto's gameplay and where they really have the strengths of the team of playing sound defensive hockey. So those I think are some really key things to focus on with Toronto. This is one of Toronto's more common matchups. I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but Quebec is the more skilled team in this matchup. But Toronto, because of their proficiency on the defensive side of the ice compared to Quebec, whereas Quebec can be really bad on defense some games. I mean, there's just some situations with Quebec where they just are terrible on defense. So I think this is a matchup where Toronto's offense can get going, and they definitely have the defensive resources to limit Quebec, especially when Toronto's at home, because like I said, Potvin does get some nice bonuses at home. Quebec has a lot of really nice shooters, but none of them are these incredibly dynamic skaters or anything like that. So I think it's well within their ability to lock a team like Quebec down for long periods of time and allow you to get some goals with Toronto. And there you can see right there what I mean with Wendell Clark is, yes, he has this very powerful shot, but he just missed a wide open net. And that's one of the frustrating things about having a player with three shot accuracy is you'll have this wide open chance that you're just, you can light the lamp on and you do everything right, and then he screws it up for you. And it can be really frustrating for a team like Toronto where they don't always get a ton of chances, and they really count on making the best of what they do create. And when a guy just throws away a chance like that, is really frustrating. But luckily, you do have Gilmour. He is their best one-on-one player. He can slice through some defenses provided they're more on their heels. If they're kind of lying in wait for him and they're trying to poke check him or just be in the way, knock the puck off his stick, they can be pretty effective at doing that because Gilmour, he only has the 4-stick handling. So I think I mentioned in the player breakdown, you have to be a little bit more selective with when you want to try and cut through defense, and because the puck will just kind of get knocked off his stick a little bit more often than you would like to see probably. But he's still definitely a one-on-one weapon due to his agility and his ability to score the puck, because he is your most consistent scorer. Unfortunately, because I think he would be better utilized as a setup man, but even at that, the 94 Igor Cooperman, the guy who did all the ratings for 94, he was not extremely kind to Gilmour when it came to his playmaking abilities. I mean, this was when Gilmour was at his best, especially on offense. He was just a tenacious player who created all sorts of chances for his teammates, and I don't think his ratings really reflect that. And I think Toronto as a team got the shaft in a lot of cases. I mean, this is a team that had 99 points. They were a very competitive third place team in a Norris division that had Chicago and Detroit, two really strong teams back then. They also had a really nice playoff run where they got to the conference finals. But alas, Toronto, I think, were definitely undersold in what they were able to get. I mean, Dave Andreychuk, 50-plus goal scorer, didn't get a lot of love. Wendell Clark didn't get a lot of love except for his shot power. Their defense core as a group didn't get a lot of love. They were pretty much, a lot of them are very slow. A lot of them don't have a lot of skills. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense because Toronto was a more defensive-minded team. They were more the mold of Chicago than Detroit, whereas Detroit was the best offensive team in the league, and Chicago was one of the best defensive teams in the league. So they're definitely closer to Chicago, but Chicago definitely got a lot more players with some really elite ratings, especially Jeremy Roenick, and Toronto just didn't get that same sort of love. And man, they are just missing a lot of wide open nets in this game. Cannot seem to find the back of the net with this team right now. It's been a struggle. But, hey, there's Clark. He's got some nice wiggle this game. Apparently, he doesn't usually make backhand floaters work, but every once in a while he remembers why he was a #1 draft pick once upon a time in the NHL, and made the goalie look bad on that one. So let's see if we can get Dave Ellett going with his 5-shot power, but puck got knocked off his stick there, unfortunately. So within this tier, I've mentioned a few times already that you're going to face a lot of very fast teams, and it can be a little bit scary, especially in tournament play. If you know your opponent likes to use faster teams, you're probably going to want to stay away from these tier 3 matchups with Toronto, because even if you like using Toronto to some extent, it's just hard to advise if your player, your opponent likes using fast teams and using a one-on-one type of offense, because they have guys like Mike Gartner, Mike Modano, Russ Courtnall, and even to some extent Neil Broughton and Esatikin, and these are just all very dynamic skaters with powerful, if inconsistent, shooting. But I mean, they are masters at getting lots of chances on net. So if your opponent likes to just be more patient and pass the puck and try and use one-timers more often, you might want to pick a matchup where you get Toronto and they get one of those other teams, the Rangers or New York, because they're a little bit tougher to use in that sense. But you really need to be careful about that. And if you're unsure, you might want to steer clear of Toronto and maybe select Toronto, Quebec if you're going to be very adamant about using Toronto, or just look at a different tier, maybe tier 4, tier 5, tier 4, tier 5. The offenses kind of die out there, and the defenses become the powerhouses, because they have a lot of strong defenses, especially in tier 5. Is known for their stronger defenses and pretty lackluster offenses. So those might be your better bets if you want those lower scoring games. If you want the higher scoring games, you probably want to go tier 1, tier 2, because they have the better offenses and the competent defense to go with it in a lot of cases. Although some people may question just how competent a defense, the defenses are in Vancouver and LA, because they can be underwhelming to a lot of people. But I think they're pretty good, underrated in a lot of cases. So I definitely have no problems putting them in those tiers, because their offenses do a lot of work. They can score 8-10 goals in a game pretty easily, even against better players, just because there's so much talent in those tiers. Whereas tier 3 is kind of a mix, but there's definitely other ways to go about it if you're looking for a very specific matchup to work with. It's kind of a funny goal. I guess Borshevsky really wanted that one for himself, because he just stood right in the way of Gilmour's slap shot, which was going to go in, and then took that goal away from him. But I don't think Gilmour would have cared, because Gilmour loved to pad the assists. He wasn't much of a goal scorer in his own right. I think he only had a few 30-goal seasons at best. He was definitely a passing center, as opposed to one that just scored a bunch of goals. So, but in this game, he is definitely capable of scoring the goals. He is your best goal scorer, so try to take him out of his comfort zone a little bit. I mean, I know he wants to just pass the puck and make his teammates incredible, but as you can see here, Gilmour, very effective in his own right. He's got 6 of my 9 goals here, and that's definitely not a mistake, because you'll have a lot of games where just Clark will not hit the net with the chances he gets, and then Borshevsky's just not as much of a goal scorer as Gilmour. So whether by design or not, Gilmour should be your main goal scorer in a lot of cases. So that's Toronto for you. I think that's a pretty typical game to play with Toronto right there. I didn't get the dynamic goal output that you might get with, say, Detroit or Chicago or even the New York Islanders. But Toronto is definitely dangerous. They're a good defensive team, and I think they're one that's can surprise some people, because, like I said, they're not exactly exciting to use, but they are definitely difficult to play against if used correctly. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode about Toronto, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below, and hope you guys stick around for some more episodes, as I still have quite a few teams left. I think I have 3, 9, 10 teams left, so 10 more episodes of this. They should be coming within the next month or two, and I do want to get some other stuff going as well on this channel. Maybe start doing some streaming, and then some playoff runs against the computer, and then maybe some more head-to-head matchups with guys online. So hopefully you guys stick around for that, and I'll definitely be looking forward to bringing it to you guys. Until then, I'll see y'all later. Bye.